Welcome back, guys, to another Mint Your Thoughts video today. So today's video a little bit different. So recently, Trench Grenade, Focus Trip, Brass Facts, and Hop, as well as X-Ray Alpha and Lucas Botkin were all on a live stream thing on, I believe it was a Trench Grenade and Focus Trips channel recently, and some very interesting stuff was said. We're going to play those clips for you that I snagged from Instagram real quick for you to see. I encourage everyone to go and check out and watch the whole thing. It is about 3.5 hours long, but if you skip to about an hour and a half is when Lucas Botkin comes on, you can get some more of the information from there. But some really interesting stuff was said as far as it relates to training and civilians. Basically, kind of summarize it, and I'll play the clips here in a minute. The thought was kind of pushed across that, you know, you have people like Lucas Botkin with TRX Arms, you have people like X-Ray Alpha who are nagging at YouTubers saying basically that, like, you know, what the YouTuber, GUNTUBER type of thing isn't important, or, you know, it's not doing anybody any good, and that they don't like training civilians. And these are people, you know, ironically, that, you know, Lucas is a civilian. The X-Ray Alpha guy, I know he has a military background, and he trains a lot of feds, yet sit here and talks about being pro 2A. And basically the whole point of this is that, you know, Brass Facts in this video makes a really good point about how the Second Amendment is mainly civilian-based, not for the military, not for law enforcement, but for mainly for civilians. And that it's important to have access to the information we have through GunTube for things like gear reviews, things like training, things like information that's being put out. You know, and it's not just this idea that, like, everyone's shilling or something like that. You know, he addresses this, like, yes, there are shills, and you do need to be a, you know, a savvy consumer of the media that you ingest. But basically, both Lucas Botkin and the X-Ray Alpha guy kind of take this approach that, you know, no, it's all kind of useless and it's all shills, and no one in the real world does this. And so we're kind of going to dive in a little bit to this and address this, kind of give you my thoughts, my little recap of this. I've got some B-roll footage just rolling in the background just to kind of keep you entertained for the ADD and ADHD breaks. But with that, let's go ahead and I'll play the clip, and you'll listen to that here and kind of get an idea of what we're talking about.
So here's the bomb I'm going to drop. I don't like training civilians. I've taught open enrollment. And of all the people I've trained, civilians are some of the hardest. And the reason, money, like a lot of money doing that. But when I've taught classes for ODAs and SWAT teams, they're there to work. And I know that sounds like super anti-2A of me to say that.
I have a website. The website exists for government agencies to find me, right? Because no one said train civilian shooters. And I don't know what the fuck your exact mission statement in terms of... I train 0 fucking civilians. There is no one in this group that supports the Second Amendment more than me. Mission statement and fucking living. You make content for a living. This is the only place where the fuck we have a conversation. Dude, this is the problem with the fucking internet.
Man, where do you think you are? You do make money from training people.
No,
but the point I'm making here is...
I know where the fuck I am, dude. Dude, you're a fucking pain in the ass, man. I know I'm on a live stream.
That's my fucking job, dude. That's what
is
they
it?
pay me for.
Be a little fucking cocksucker, irritating fuck? That's your job? Exactly. Dude, I hope we meet sometime. Because, dude,
I'm gonna hug the shit out of you,
you guys are I'm not gonna hug you. You guys are fucking YouTubers, dude.
You're gonna see me and be like, that guy's fucking hug me,
man. The internet is the only place where I take heat rounds from fucking dipshits like you. That's the fucking problem with the fucking internet.
So, Matt, I'll
fucking live.
So yeah, bit of a crapshoot with that. So we got a lot to go over, so let's hit it hard. So coming straight out of the gate, Lucas Botkin and X-Ray Alpha talking about how they don't like to train civilians. Training civilians is hard. X-Ray Alpha just doesn't do it, period. Lucas Botkin obviously does train civilians, but, you know, talking about how it's harder than training military professionals, ODA, SWAT teams, guys like that. You know, and it's funny because it's like, well, duh. You know, of course it's going to be harder to train somebody who has less of a background in something like this than someone who's been doing this professionally for, you know, 10, 15 years. If you've got guys who are career cops coming in to then be SWAT teams, things like that, there's a certain amount of vetting, a certain amount of training, a certain amount of competency that's going into that. Same thing with ODAs or different groups like that. There are groups of people who are performing at a higher level. They have already have an underground knowledge, a base knowledge of training But if you're coming in and training civilians, like, you have to understand that, like, people are coming there from all aspects of life. You might have prior service guys. You might have dudes who are just, you know, who are competent with firearms. You might have guys who this is the first time they've ever picked up an AR, you know? So yeah, it's going to be harder to train civilians. And yes, it's going to be harder to instill that mindset. But to have such a negative outlook on it was what was really discouraging for me coming from these guys. These are guys who have, at least not so much X-Ray, but at least with Lucas Botkin, has built his reputation and his business on training civilians, and here he is, like, disparaging that. And I can understand, you know, Stan, you could, the difference between disparaging and just admitting the realities on the ground, but, you know, it's this issue where it almost comes across as like they don't want to train civilians, they don't like to train civilians, you know, and it's really discouraging for me, because coming from my background, I spent 10.5 years in the Navy. I was a Master at Arms. I was a line coach. I was a range instructor. You know, spent a lot of time teaching people how to operate weapons effectively and employ them in the proper usage. I did that on the military side. I worked in the gun industry for a while at a local gun shop and gun range, was a range instructor there for a little bit. With that, like, you know, I've taught people how to shoot privately. I've taught people how to shoot publicly and professionally. And, you know, it's always going to be a little harder to teach people when they don't have any basis. You know, there's pros and cons with that. One, you have to cover a lot of ground, but two, they don't have any bad habits. So there's pros and cons. But yeah, it's always going to be harder to get someone trained up properly that has no idea or no base knowledge that you have to build up on than someone who has, you know, at least a certain level of competency going into it. You know, if you get someone who's confident and in their capability and their way that they can handle themselves around firearms, and then you build skills on top of that, that's obviously way easier than someone who's like, hey man, I just bought my first AR. I've never really shot guns before outside of just like recreationally, but like I want to learn. You're going to have to build up a base set of skills, right? So of course it's going to be a little bit harder, but it's like, dude, come on. Like, that's kind of your job. And as far as X-Ray goes, to have the audacity to sit there and tell somebody like, oh, I'm super pro 2A, but I don't open up my training to civilians. Like, how is that pro 2A? You're being super exclusionary. You're being the exact opposite, in my opinion, where you're only giving your resources to military and law enforcement. So in the second and third clips with Matt from X-Ray kind of going off, basically the context there is that he leads off with having very negative comments about the YouTube GunTuber space. And it's okay to have an opinion. I totally get that. And maybe from his line of work, he's kind of getting that. But he's taking the approach from his view that, you know, no one professionally refers people to YouTube for anything, which I don't believe. I don't agree with that. I understand kind of where he's trying to come from, in the sense that he's like, look, if you're a pipe hitter, if you're out there, you know, being an ODA, SWAT guy, with some of the dudes that I train, like, you're not leaving your training or your knowledge up to YouTube. But everyone goes to YouTube with this, and I'm not exaggerating with that. Like even people I knew who were doing those job fields, right, coming into the gun shop all the time, if they wanted to know about some gun that they want to buy recreationally for fun, or even for some training purposes or whatever, the first thing they do is they always hit up YouTube, and then they come ask us at the gun shop. Like, they seek this similar influencer level type of knowledge, right? Or people who are like, oh, I want to spend money on something, but I don't know where to put my money at yet. Let me check out the reviews with some of the people that I trust. And I've built that kind of trust with, because they've had positive reviews in the past. And, you know, I'll spend my money there and on whatever they suggest, instead of just going out willy-nilly. You know, I mean, I think all of us who have probably know somebody who's law enforcement, military, something like that, someone who in theory has a training, has a pedigree, has a background, and they own the crap tier guns with like the worst accessories on them. You know, I mean, I've got a buddy of mine who's a cop, and when it comes to guns, you know, his whole thing, he's like, look, I know how to shoot them, I know how to run them, I don't know, you know, I don't know brand names, things like that, I just run whatever works, you know? So it's like he comes to me, or he comes to other people for, like, when it comes to his personal stuff, about getting ideas and knowledge for what to spend his money on, because if it's not something that he's issued, he's not too familiar with it. And that's pretty common across the board. That's very common across the board, whether it's military, law enforcement, whatever. Unless you truly are like in this kind of gun space, a lot of that goes over a lot of people's heads, and that's totally understandable, which is why that GunTuber space kind of comes in, you know. And yes, there are people who, you know, are shills, or are doing it for bad reasons, or just want the content to be, you know, feeding the machine. I totally understand that. But there's a lot of people who, you know, they're doing this for the love of the game. They're doing this because they want to impart knowledge. They want to share information. You know, maybe they don't have a ton of views. Maybe they're not making a ton of money, whatever. Maybe they're not making money at all. They just want to give information out. And honestly, like, I know, like, Brass Facts and Hop, they do make some money obviously off this. They're trying to do it as a job. I get that. I respect that. But I also like respect and value their opinions because they've had some pretty positive opinions in the past before. I've bought stuff off of their recommendations and been pleasantly surprised, you know, and pleasantly enjoyed the stuff that I've got. So, you know, their opinion holds up and their trust is there. So Matt from X-Ray is kind of taking the opinion that, like, you know, oh, you guys suck. It's all fake. It's all YouTube, blah, 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 blah. You know, only listen to professionals. Only listen to professionals. And it comes off like super fuddy in that sense. You know, like, oh, only, like, almost like the equivalent of like only the police and military should have guns. You know, as if this guy's acting as if, you know, if you're not in the military or law enforcement space or heavily involved in that space, that your opinion basically doesn't matter. You know, in the video, he spends several minutes talking about how, well, you know, your pedigree doesn't matter. Where you come from doesn't matter. It's your competency. And then proceeds to tell everybody that their opinion doesn't matter because of his pedigree. So, like, I'll tell you right now, you know, if you listen to the podcast that we run, if you listen to the YouTube channel, one of the biggest things we harp on, I don't care if you're any type of special whatever or any type of super cool guy, cool kid dude, whatever. I don't care, right? Because there's plenty of people out there that have some kind of cool pedigree or some kind of cool background to them that don't know shit about whatever it is you're talking about, right? You know, the only thing I'll agree with Matt that I think he made a really good point about was that whenever he even talks about this, whenever he is with his guys, whenever he was in the military, if they wanted to learn how to go out and climb mountains, they'd go to a mountain climbing guy. If they want to go out and they want to learn how to jump out of airplanes, they go to people who do that for a living. Like, this is, you know, they find the professionals, they find people who do that. And the irony there is that he completely then skips over the people who are like, well, that's what these GunTuber guys are doing. Like, that's what people like Hop and other dudes like Hop, like Trench Grenade, like Focus Trip. That's what they're doing. They've made their job to be the people who go out and, like, test these things out for you, you know? So to just completely disparage that and shut that down, I think is pretty hurtful. One, not only to the 2A community, but also, like, to this space in general. You know, being a guy on myself that, like, yes, I have my own channel, sure, but I've spent tons of time looking up, you know, good information out there, like plate carrier setups, how to pack Alice packs, like all kinds of, you know, how to set up the rifle, this kind of rifle concept, things like this. Like, Barrel and Hatchet is a great resource for people that are looking for, like, really good information, stuff like that. And, you know, there's a lot of people who are just putting this out there for free just because they want that information dissipated. And it's really good information. And you know what? You don't have to believe everything you read on the internet. You don't have to believe everything you see on the internet. But it's really good to get out there and see people's thinking and, like, why they do certain things. Like, oh, why is that guy's chest rig set up that way? Why is that guy's plate carrier set up that way? And so for me, it was just like, man, this guy is kind of going way off his rocker on the sense of, you know, oh, if you're not ODA, then fuck you. And it's pretty messed up, I think, for the gun community to be like that, because there's a lot of people, I think, that are in that realm where, you know, oh, if you don't have some kind of, you know, super cool guy background, then you're not worth listening to. And surprisingly, I mean, I think you'll find out the civilian market and the civilian side of the firearms world has produced a lot of really innovative products and a lot of really innovative information and stuff that's out there. You know, especially, like, you know, as much as I'm harping on Lucas Botkin in the beginning here, you know, how much he's a straight civilian, and now he's going out and training those military guys. So, you know, to Matt's point, it's like, you want to sit here and disparage all these guys that are taking their own time to actually do something and then film it and show you guys stuff to also help inspire you and help you get out there and go do something, you know, and you want to crap all over it because they're not ODA or SWAT. You know, I mean, that's the part just kind of pisses me off about this whole thing, is that you have guys like that who just have such a superiority complex that, like, I'm better than you because XYZ. And if you're not XYZ, then shut up, sit down, and listen. And, you know, that's not what we're about here, right? I mean, at least, like, the whole thing of, like, me and my channel and why we set out to start it the way we did was to basically prove that, like, you don't have to be some kind of spec war badass to be able to go out and do this. You know, like, you're a normal person, you work a 9-to-5, you got a wife, you got kids, you know, you have commitments, but you still want to be able to train, you still want to be able to be competent, you want to be able to defend your life and liberty. You know, you can still go do that without having to be some door-kicking badass. And that's the thing I think is really lost here, is these guys, the irony is, they all get paid to train people, and they are harping on people who are getting paid to train people, you know, like Brass Facts, Trench Grenade, Focus Trip, like I said, like whether it be actual training, whether it be drills, or whether it be like reviews on certain gear to let you know like what's good, what's not, blah, blah, blah. Like that's some level of training and some level of knowledge imparted. You know, these are people who are professional trainers who obviously don't think that you're worth their time because they have just flat out said it in the beginning. They don't think you're worth their time. And so instead, somebody else has to step in and fill that gap. You know, and the funny thing is about stepping in and filling that gap is that they talk about how, you know, oh, well, you know, a lot of it's just gimmicky stuff or it's, you know, drama or, you know, just, you know, goofy guys or people doing, you know, Lucas Botkin's like to say everything's retarded and gay. But you know what? That's the thing. It's like, let's be real here. If someone produced a 30-minute video of just an instruction course, right, with no entertainment value to it or, you know, okay production value or even decent production value, but just like a very dry, very clear-cut thing, you know damn well not a lot of people are going to watch that. You want to, you know, if you don't want to prove me wrong, go look at the highest grossing channels. The highest grossing channels on YouTube are things like Garand Thumb. Now, Garand Thumb has had some really good videos in the past where he's put out some of his survival series stuff, very informational, right? Very cinematic openings and things like that that draw you in and you want to learn the information, but it's also done in a way that like grabs your attention. Or like you have things like with Admin or like other channels who, you know, people put stuff out there, like even smaller channels like the Modern Frontiersman, the Real Modern Minuteman, Risky Krisky, you know, things like that. There's an entertainment aspect as well to what they're putting out there, because if it's super boring and dry, you're not going to care. And for those of you who've been to classes, those of you who've been to courses, you know as well as I do, a good instructor that keeps it entertaining makes all the difference. Because if you get someone who's just dry, itchy eyes, you don't want to be there. It's boring. You don't want to listen. And the same thing goes for this. Like, look at Brass Facts with like the video essays and things like that. There's a reason he's got the B-roll footage in the background. There's a reason I have B-roll footage in the background. Because if I just put a simple thing of me talking here, if this was an educational piece for the last 20 minutes I've been talking, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be listening. You wouldn't have stuck by this far. You know, so there's a reason why certain things are presented that way. And, you know, Ben Stager hops on the live stream at one point, and he makes a very good point. He's like, look, here's the deal. Most people, that's what they want. They want the positive information, but they also want to present it to them in a fun way. Not everything has to be super clear-cut and dry like a safety brief. You know, like how Lucas and X-Ray are trying to make it. Like, look, I've been in those things in the military. I've been in those training scenarios. If you don't have a good instructor who can keep it entertaining, it's super boring. You don't want to be there, and you don't remember half of it, right? But you got a good instructor who could keep you going, who knows how to work with you, and who keeps it entertaining. You're way more involved. And I think that's where the nice part of YouTube is that, yeah, you know what? You can go get your gun slop. You can go watch how many, you know, pumpkins can a 50 cal go through or whatever. That's totally fine. No one is stopping you. It's totally fun. That's acceptable. You can have fun. But you can also go out and have, you know, that same channel that does stuff like how many, you know, you'll have channels that like will do funny stuff like that. Like how many pumpkins can that go through? Like I think Iraq veteran 8888, big guy I watched, you know, whenever I first started getting into GunTube. He would, you know, he has a very good balance of that. Very informational videos that are done very well and semi-entertainingly. And then other ones that are just goofy fun stuff, right? Not everything has to be super serious all the time. And I think that's the thing that's lost with Lucas and X-Ray here is I get where they're coming from in the sense that they're looking at everything as having to be super serious all the time. But that's not everyone's interest. You know, even in the gun space, like me, I'm a big guy on the whole, like modern day Minuteman type of thing. And anyone who follows his channel, you guys would know that. But even then, it's like, sometimes I just want to put something fun out, right? I just want to have fun and post it out there with you. Not everything has to be super serious, you know, man the gates, be ready, battle ready all the time. It doesn't have to be like that. So anyway, in summary, again, go out, watch the full video if you have the time, or at least skip to about a minute, or skip to about an hour and a half in when Lucas Botkin hops on and listen from there. But don't be like these two guys. Don't be like Lucas on this. Don't be like X-Ray. Don't be a dick. Don't gatekeep. You know, the gun space is not to be gate-kept. Put out good information. Help share good information. If you're seeking information, seek it from good, reputable sources. And the only way to know that they're good, reputable sources is to put them to the test, you know? Watch the reviews. See, like, hey, if they ever had a bad review, you know, see, is there good? Is there bad? You know, if it's some dude who's only ever put positive reviews out there on everything he's ever reviewed, that's a shill. If there's a dude who's like, hey, this is good, this is bad, this sucks, this doesn't, blah, 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 whatever, you know, take those honest reviews from that. Also, you know, if you've watched a review on a product that you already own and you're like, oh, this product's like junk and this guy's singing its praises, or vice versa, you know, you can get that feedback to be like, this guy said this thing, it turned out to be true. I can build a level of trust there, right? Don't just go off someone's pedigree like these guys are suggesting, because you know what? There are plenty of examples of super high-speed guys who get an endorsement by some big company. Look at Kyle Lamb when he was shooting Smith & Wessons. They talk about that again in the full video of the live stream. He was shooting Smith & Wessons for a long time. Then he got a deal by SIG, and all of a sudden Smith & Wessons are crap, SIG is awesome. You know, people play to that. And so don't just go off of someone because, oh, he's a Green Beret or he's a former cop or whatever, right? See if the people are competent. And you know what? I'm a firm believer that there are civilians who are just as competent, if not more so, than people who are in professional lines of work when it comes to the gun tube space. So with that, guys, you've listened to me nag on long enough. Thank you so much for listening. You guys really make everything worth it in the channel and in the space. So please continue being awesome people. Continue doing what you do. And have a good one. Catch you on the next one.